Welcome to the first demonstration of implementing with Business Process Manager Level 1. My name's Ed Barda, and I will be walking you through the following items in this demonstration. The first is, how do we author a business process? The second is, how is a business process deployed and how does an end user access the application? And the third is, how do we manage the artifacts created as part of the process application? Throughout these demos, I'll be using the vacation request process, which is different than the hiring request process outlined in the exercises that you'll be performing, but the principles shown throughout this demo are related and apply to the hiring request process. There are 3 different configurations that are available for IBM Business Process Manager or IBM BPM, and we will be using the standard configuration for all of these demonstrations. Now, the goal of this demo is to provide a high-level overview of IBM BPM's features, such as the Process Designer, the Process Portal, and the Process Center console. So let's begin our BPM journey. The first thing we need to do is start the IBM BPM servers. Now, if you have a server stood up as part of your enterprise, the server might already be started for you. Because I'm working on the actual server, I'll show you how to start and stop the server manually, and you can follow along in your own environment to start your server as well. The first thing we'll do is come over and we'll hit Start, All Programs, and then I go to IBM, Business Process Manager Standard, and then we're going to click the Quick Start. Now, this is one of the ways we can do it. This provides you a good visual indicator that your servers have started. There are multiple different ways we can do this, but this is the easiest way for you right now to get started off with starting your server. Now, we'll let it populate, and the deployment environment and administration will populate with a link that will ask us to start the servers. Now, once it's populated, we'll click Start the Process Center Deployment Environment. Now, you'll see a command prompt window will pop up, and it will populate showing all of the things that are going on in the background. What's actually happening, and we'll walk through this here, under Start, All Programs, IBM, Business Process Manager Standard. If we go to Profiles, now you can see here's 2 folders here. The first is the Deployment Manager profile, and the second is the Node 1 profile. And both of these are the other way to actually start the servers. So to start it up manually, you can click both of these. But what's going on in the background here is, you can see here, starting Deployment Manager profile, Manager profile. It's actually starting the Deployment Manager profile first, and then we're going to start the node agent. And after that, we'll get a visual confirmation that it's started. Okay, so as you can see here, it took a couple of minutes, probably about 5 minutes, to fully populate this. And you can see now we're presented with the box. We've started up our profile. The profile is open for e-business with a process ID. Then we created the node, and the node also is open for e-business with a process ID. Then we're starting the cluster. The BPM config completed successfully, and then we're asked to press any key to continue. Now, here's an interesting thing, though. If we press a key, the command prompt goes away, the command window goes away, and then we're presented with this quick start. Now, the servers are not yet ready to be accessed. Okay, that's the one thing that we have to understand. If you were to do this manually, you would have to wait a certain amount of time. The nice thing about the quick start window is that it will populate and it will show us when everything is ready to go. So another couple of minutes we'll have to wait, and you'll see that it will start to populate, and when it's complete, then we'll continue on with the demonstration. Okay, so here we are, and we have 4 different sections populated now. We have the Deployment Environment Administration, the Administration Consoles and Tools, the Process Application Consoles and Tools, and the Documentation sections, and all 4 have something involved or been populated on this window. Now, this is the visual indicator to tell us that the servers are ready to go. Now, in order to start our journey with developing our applications, the first thing you need to do is we need to install the Process Designer. Now, if we minimize this window for a second, and we can also minimize this quick start window, you'll see here that the IBM Process Designer has already been installed on this environment. So we've already actually installed this. Now, if it was not installed, what I would have to do is I would have to go into the Process Center console. And if I click this, it will give me the URL that I can go to. If you don't have that URL, if you have this on a server, you'll have to get the name of the server, and then the port usually will be 9080, but that is configurable. And then it would be /process center, and that will bring you to this window. Now, we can log in with our credentials. If you have the credentials on the server right now, you might already have a user login. And we're going to use WE_author1 for the username and WE_author01 for the password. So the first time that you come into the process portal, you'll see there will be a Getting Started with IBM Process Center dialog box. And we should just be able to close this out. I'm going to maximize this. Once the page is fully populated, you'll see on the right-hand side here, we can download the Process Designer. And when we download the Process Designer, then we'll have to unzip it, and then it will have an installer where we can install the Process Designer on your PC. So it's that easy to actually get the Process Designer down there. But as I stated before, we already have it. So how do we get started here? We have to just double-click this icon. Now, on this environment, it's already been set up for you. We already have an account that you will be working on and using, and I will use the same account here. Okay, so the Process Designer has now loaded up. We can log in with a username that has been created for us, WE_author1. And for the password, it will be WE_author01. And if we click Login, it will populate, and then we'll log into the Process Designer. Now, the Process Designer is an application that is created to be installed on your desktop, and it communicates through the internet back to a process center, a central hub, to enable collaborative development between all of your developers. So all of the developers will log in through the Process Designer into the central repository, the Process Center, to do all of the development. Okay, so now we're in, and you're presented with a Getting Started with IBM Process Designer 855 menu, and you can browse this at your own leisure. But I'm going to go ahead and do a high-level overview of what we see here. So now you can see here in the first window, now take a look at the top. We have 4 different tabs: Process Apps, Toolkits, Servers, and Admin. Now, the highest level container for your processes is called a process application. And that's important to understand, as we'll see a little bit later, what we can do with these process applications. But each one of these process applications contains all of the artifacts necessary to deploy your process. So this one is called Hiring Sample. It has an acronym, HSS. It will tell you when it's been updated. And we can open this in Designer. We can click here on the Hiring Sample, and we can look at the different snapshots here. And this is, once we create a snapshot of our process application, that we can then go ahead and clone it, we can activate it, we can archive it. Archiving meaning remove it from this front page. That doesn't necessarily mean it gets rid of it per se. And we can go through a lot of the different abilities of our snapshot. We can export it, and we can install it. So exporting meaning we can package it up and save it as a file. Installing means we can deploy it to a different environment and install it onto our test, our staging, or our production environments using this link here. We have a history, and we can see the different history of this process application. I can manage this. And part of the managing it is changing the process application name, the acronym, the description, and then also we can provide access to the different users in the environment. So either the groups, TW admins and TW authors, are both groups on the system, or we can add users, individual users, to the process application to be able to read. And whenever you add it to this manage access list, you'll always be able to read it. We have to provide the authorization to write or the admin, and the admin is also allowed to deploy the asset. So those are the different rights that we'll be able to provide them. We also have a thing called tracks. Now, tracks are provide the ability for the process application to continue on at the tip while development may go on that tip. And if we have a service pack that we need to provide for a prior snapshot that has been deployed into a different environment, we can then work on that other snapshot while the tip continues, and then we'll have to manually merge the two development efforts back into the tip. So that's very powerful feature of tracks, and if you decide to use that, I highly recommend using tracks inside of your development. And the final thing is the governance over the application. And this provides you different services that you can use to govern the deployment of your assets. Or when the snapshot status changes, the installation is requested. What it does is each of these events trigger a process to be run, and if you need to have some oversight over that event in the system, that process, you can designate how the system will respond. The final tab is the servers tab, and now this is not going to be very interesting to you right now, but if there were servers that were connected up to the process center where we could deploy our applications, we would have them listed here. And so we could see whether or not they were online and offline, which snapshots have been deployed to that environment, and all the process applications that are part of that environment. So all of that would be shown here in the servers tab. Now, we have a middle tab here called toolkits, and we're going to go through toolkits a little bit later on in the course. But what toolkits are they're just the same as a process application, just a whole bunch of assets, but they've been packaged up and they're available to the different process applications to use. So, and one of them that is very commonly used is the coaches. It's actually a default to be used by all the process applications. So you're going to link to that, and then all of the assets that are part of that coaches toolkit you can utilize inside of your process application. The final tab you have here is admin, and we're not going to go through all of the different functions that you have on admin, but if you have admin rights onto the process designer, you have the ability to administrate all of the different assets here. Now, we do not go through all of the admin functionality in this course. We do have other courses available to you if you're interested in doing administration on IBM BPM. Okay, so let's go back to the process applications tab. Okay, so let's create our first process application. I'm going to click this create new process app, and I have to provide a process application name. That would be called vacation request. I'll provide an acronym, and then I'll provide a description, and this is anything that you want to provide that might give another developer an idea of what the process application does. Okay, once I hit that, I click create. And once it's created, you'll see it pop up right here under our process apps. Now that we've created our first process application, we can create a process inside of that process application. Again, a process application is just a collection or repository of all of the artifacts that relate to one particular process. We will create a business process diagram or a business process definition, also called a BPD, inside of our process application. Before we open the vacation request we created, let's look at the default process application that is already created for us. If you click the link to open in the designer, it will bring us to the designer view inside the process designer application. Okay, so now we find ourselves in the process designer. The designer is one of 3 different views or tools available in the process designer. So you can see here on the top left, you see the designer and then the inspector, and we will be working with the inspector in this course as well. And the final one is the optimizer. The optimizer tool is covered in depth in our analyst course offerings for WebSphere education. To the right, you see the link for the Process Center, and the Process Center is what we just came from. So if I click this link, it'll return us back to the front page of our Process Center. I can either click there or I can click this link, and this will open up the last process application that we were just looking at. The final link on the top you see is the snapshot link, and the snapshot link provides us a one-time capture of all of the assets inside of our process application. We can snapshot this, and the snapshot is the container that will be used to deploy our assets into a different environment, whether that be test, cert, or production, or any other environment that you might set up to connect to the Process Center. And the Process Center is our development environment. Now we can continue down the left-hand side, and on the left-hand side you see the library. These are all the categories that are available to us to group our assets. You can see here the first one is the processes, and this contains all of the processes that are part of the process application. Just double click the process on the left hand side here, and it just opens up inside of our canvas, and you will see the process in the main window. The main sections that you see inside of the process designer, and we have a drag and drop interface that we can create our BPDs. On the right hand side, we refer to this as the palette, and on the middle we normally refer to it as the canvas. And we can drag and drop any of our assets from one side to the other, and then we'll be able to create the different artifacts necessary to complete our process. Now, as I drag and drop, you see the bottom panel changes, and this provides us all of the different categories and all of the different settings that we'll use to configure this artifact on our canvas. Okay, and if I want to delete anything off of the canvas, all I have to hit is the delete button, and it will automatically delete that from our canvas. Next, let's take a look at our inspector. Our inspector view provides us a top-level view of all of the instances that we've created for this process definition. So if I am to create an instance of this process, they would be listed on the left-hand side, and then for each instance, if there are any tasks associated, it would show up on the right-hand side. So how do I go about doing that? I can create an instance by clicking this icon, Run Process. Once we save the process, if any changes were made, it will always ask us whether or not we want to save this first. Once we save it, then I can create an instance, and the instance will be created on the left-hand side. It will assign an instance ID. Every instance has a due date for the entire instance. It provides a status and a process name. It tells us which snapshot for this process that we are running and the instance name. Now, the snapshot on a development server will always be tip. If we had multiple different servers, we would have them listed here, and we could actually look into a production environment to see all of the instances that are running on that environment. Now, that is only if it is an online server. If it is an offline server, meaning that it's not connected, I cannot connect up to it with this process center, then we would not be able to look at those instances. But as you can see here, once I created this process, we have a token associated with this first activity. And that first activity it provides a status of it, the owner of that activity or that task, and the subject of that task, the priority, a due date, and a task ID. On the right-hand side, we can see the execution state for this process. And we can see here the token ID, and we can see any of the variables that are associated with this task. So If we ever have to step through our process and in our development environment, we're going to be doing a lot of debugging of our instances and our tasks inside of our instances. So in the upper right hand box, you'll see here there's an icon for a debug, so you can step through the service, or to the left of that, the run button, so you can actually run the service. Also on the left hand side here, we can suspend an instance, and we can resume an instance, and we can delete an instance or terminate an instance using the icons on the left hand side. So if this instance I wanted to pause or suspend, I can click this button and you can see immediately that the status for the instance is suspended. If I want to resume, I click the button to resume. If I want to terminate, the safest way to do this is to terminate first and provide the status of terminated, and then I can come in here and I can delete the instance, and once we click OK, the instance is now deleted. Now sometimes you'll need to actually do a manual refresh of this view, and this button is the one that you would use to refresh this view to see if any new instances have popped up on the left hand side. Again, this is a collaborative environment. If somebody else were to create another instance of this process, this would not refresh automatically for us. We would be able to refresh it and see that instance pop up by using this button here. Now we skipped over one icon over on the right here, and it's gonna be really good to provide a lot of information. So let me create an instance here, and it's gonna give you information about this instance inside of the process portal. So once we click it, it opens up a browser window. All right, and it's going to bring us to our process portal, so we can take a look at that. I'm going to log in with WE_author1 and WE_author01 again. And the process portal comes up in Internet Explorer, but we can actually configure that, and we'll show you how to do that later on in the course. You'll actually have that as part of an exercise. Okay, and so now that it has loaded up, it brings us to the process portal. Now, we're going to go through the process portal at a later time, but this is just a quick high-level overview of this instance that we just created. So that's really kind of convenient to be able to see all of the instance information inside of the process portal just by clicking one button. All right, so I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to go ahead and terminate, and then delete this instance, and it will delete all the records. I'll just go ahead and click yes. Okay, so now we're back into the inspector view. And so that's an overview of the inspector as well as the designer view. And we'll get into creating your own BPDs in the next demonstration.